Still to come tonight, Liam Neeson stars in our Friday night film It's Taken 2 at 11:20. Now, with all the very latest, it's the ITV News.
How many chances missed, a 0-0 deadlock, but it's Scotland who came away smiling.
John Stones is there, hits the post.
Nerves were shredded in the opening moments at either end, but in the end, neither England nor Scotland could break through. There might have been social distancing in the stadium, but this is the scene in central London. Thousands of Scotland fans poured in, whatever the warnings about rising rates of COVID. Perhaps the burden of history was too much for both teams tonight, but there is no doubt that Scotland gave England a big run for their money. Steve will take us through it all from Wembley. Dan's with the fans, and Geraint is in Glasgow, also on News at 10 tonight. Out of step with a true blue seat, while the Tories took a by-election thrashing from the Lib Dems.
It feels like all of the money goes to the north, whereas we're putting in all of the money here in the south.
More good news on the efficacy of the vaccines as 18-year-olds join the queue. The fear among pet owners as some cat foods may be linked to a deadly feline disease.
And we take a first look at a line that hasn't been open for almost 50 years and will finally give access to Dartmoor again.
This is ITV News at 10 with Julie Etchingham.
Good evening. After so much build-up, perhaps we should have seen that result coming on a tense night at a wet Wembley. The margins were, at times, incredibly fine, but neither England nor Scotland could find a way to claim a famous victory. Just like their very first encounter in 1872, the 115th meeting of the two sides ended in a goalless draw, a result and performance which Scotland will certainly be happier with. They'll perhaps even feel they should have won it. For their part, England seemed a bit lethargic, a surprise given that it was such a momentous occasion. There was certainly no repeat of Gazza's heroics of '96. The result still means England are well placed, though, to qualify for the next round, albeit hardly leaving their rivals quaking in their boots. Scotland, meanwhile, have given themselves hope.
It may be the oldest of rivalries in international football, but England and Scotland rarely meet these days. That is what makes tonight such a special occasion. And the reason so many thousands, ticket or no ticket, have been drawn here. While the Scots who've headed south have made themselves heard all across London, at Wembley they're heavily outnumbered, inside the stadium by 10-1.
1-0 Scotland.
3-0 England. We can take a draw. We'll be happy with a draw. We'll take a draw.
Excited but nervous. Very nervous. But we can do it. We're going to win.
The players determined tonight to ignore the history and tensions surrounding this fixture and leave all that to the fans. In the stands tonight, football royalty. For the hostilities, unity, Scotland joining England's players taking the knee. The visitors were out of the traps quickest, Che Adams with a chance to silence Wembley. After a frantic start, England settled. John Stones airborne and all alone, but just not accurate enough. Saving England, but nearly handing Che Adams a gift. England had to wait until the second half to land their first shot on target. Mason Mount letting fly, David Marshall strong and safe in the Scotland goal. The visitors' retaliation was swift. Lyndon Dykes' instinct matched only by Reece James' quick thinking. Surely something would have to give. England, food for thought.
I think it was a frustrating night. I think we know we can play better. We've got to give Scotland huge credit. They defended valiantly, they played well, and in the end we didn't do enough to win the game. If you're not going to win the game in a tournament, you've got to make sure you don't lose it.
Look, we'll take a point, it keeps us alive, but it's important that we use this feeling, we use the
the fans been happy with us going into Tuesday, and it's important that we, try and use it to get a positive result, which we need to try and get through this group.
Arguments about who deserved to win will continue long into the night, which in the end is what it's all about.
Nothing going forward, no inspiration, no creativity.
We love you.
Yeah, 69.
And you should stick to cricket. Very good.
Yeah, you're really good at cricket.
For Scotland, tonight has given hope. Conversely, England's reputation as one of the tournament favourites has surely taken a hit. Steve Scott, News at 10, Wembley.
Well, even without the goals, it was a special night, and not just for the lucky fans allowed inside Wembley. Many more headed to pubs and fan zones. Ticketless Scottish supporters have been warned to stay away from London because of the pandemic, but despite that request, thousands descended on the capital, packing together for the occasion.
The Tartan Army invaded London in spectacular style before the match. Leicester Square was theirs, and theirs alone. Social distancing and any concern over COVID-19 apparently forgotten. The police had put a dispersal order in place until tomorrow, but clearly they weren't going to shift this lot easily. In the official fan zones from London to Birmingham to Glasgow, the atmosphere was a bit thinner. After a scoreless first half, fans were trying to put a brave face on it.
It's good. Just gutted that we can't be there, but it's making up for it.
After a tense 90 minutes and no goals, fans were left with frayed nerves and those outside with soaked shirts.
Disappointed is the word. I've sat here in the cold and in the rain, and it's 0-0.
It was always going to be like a tight competition. I'm just glad we didn't lose, to be honest.
But up in the midsummer twilight of Glasgow, the mood was much more defiant.
To be fair, I thought Scotland were the better team by a mile. We had the best chances. We should have got 3 points, but 1 point is better than nothing if we can go to Hampden on Tuesday, play against Croatia and win.
Amazing. They did fabulous. 0-0. I'm happy with that. They played their hearts out. It's all we can ask for.
It's not a win, but I'll take the draw. It's great. To not lose against England is amazing.
The police in Leicester Square did finally bring the party to an end there. A disappointing scoreline and dismal weather helping to clear the streets. The clash so many had waited so long for, not quite living up to its billing. Dan Rivers, News at 10.
So what has the fallout been so far tonight? Steve's at Wembley for us and Geraint is in Glasgow. First to you, Steve. This is not the game we expected from England tonight, was it?
Absolutely not, and it certainly wasn't the result that most people were expecting. But as you say, no, England fans were expecting an awful lot more from their team this evening. I mean, England were lacklustre tonight. I mean, at times going forward, they were turgid even. When you think they're here at Wembley against Scotland in front of their own fans, and they only had one shot on target in the entire game. It was just very, very disappointing for them. By contrast, Scotland were urgent, they were lively, and there are those who will argue on the balance of chances that they deserved to win this game. They deserved the 3 points. So for Scotland, a lot of hope going forward into their final game. For England, I think, a lot of soul-searching if they're going to go far in this tournament, which, of course, is what they want to do. Now, both teams play again next Tuesday. Scotland go back to Hampden. Well, they are playing Croatia. England are back here where they're playing the Czech Republic. Those two teams, by the way, played each other tonight, and the final score there was 1 apiece.
OK, Steve, thank you for that. Let's go back to Geraint then. And Geraint, we were going to talk about relief, but it was sort of joy and hope for the Scots tonight. What's it been like where you are?
Well, Julie, when they told me that I was going to watch this game at a socially distanced fan zone, my heart did sink a bit. I was quite wrong, though. The atmosphere here tonight was just fantastic. 3,000 Scottish fans, the Tartan Army's home guard, you might call them, sitting at picnic tables here on Glasgow Green. There was a fantastic moment halfway through the first half when the fans at Wembley on the big screen started singing Flower of Scotland. The fans here got up on the tables and started singing back to them. It's like being at a rock concert, and as Steve was saying, what a performance the team rewarded them with. Real composure and courage and confidence, transformed from their performance against the Czech Republic on Monday, and really a massive achievement for this Scottish side to go down to Wembley and get a result against a team like England with as much quality as it's got. The other great moment tonight, Julie, was about 2 minutes before the end when John McGinn, the Scottish midfielder, cleared the Scottish penalty area to snuff out the last England attack. The place here just went crazy. The fans reacted like he'd just scored. And if they do beat Croatia on Tuesday night, well, Glasgow is going to be a very noisy place.
Sounds like you've had a good night, Geraint. Thank you very much indeed for that. Well, there was at least one side celebrating a big win today, albeit political in nature. In the bluest of Tory heartlands, the Lib Dems more than overturned a majority of 16,000 to win the Chesham and Amersham by-election. Talk of a crumbling blue wall might sound a little bit premature at this stage, but with Boris Johnson seemingly so focused on winning in the north, and some have that view, some Conservatives fear their base is being taken for granted.
You know what happens when a really powerful, strong orange force goes against a blue wall?
If you're going to steal votes from Boris Johnson, why not a Johnson-style stunt too? Just one result perhaps, but no small feat, overturning a 16,000 Tory majority.
The Liberal Democrat Party is duly elected.
This campaign has shown that no matter where you live, or how supposedly safe a constituency may appear to be, if you want a Liberal Democrat Member of Parliament, you can have a Liberal Democrat Member of Parliament.
Controversy over planning reforms and HS2 partly explains the swing to the Lib Dems. Voters here fearing the Green Belt is under threat from the Tories, but the Lib Dem leader claims it's more than that.
What came up on the doorsteps were people feeling they'd been ignored by the Conservatives, taken for granted for too long, and the fact that Boris Johnson keeps talking about the red wall and going up the north and ignoring the south, I think has troubled people.
Talk of a blue wall crumbling may be exaggerated, but there's no doubt that Ed Davey has planted a Lib Dem flag firmly in what was rock-solid Tory territory. It means in the south that Boris Johnson can now take nothing for granted.
Certainly a disappointing result, and I want to thank Peter Fleet, who's outstanding a local candidate, but there were particular circumstances there, and we are getting on with delivering our agenda for the whole country.
Political analysts say for some voters the Tory brand has become simply the Brexit brand.
They spend a lot of time symbolically orientating themselves and positioning themselves in the terms of their image as a Leave party. Then what signal does that send to a Remain voter in the southeast of England? It suggests, perhaps, that the Conservative Party isn't interested in representing those voters.
At this dance class in the constituency, they say the Conservatives are increasingly out of step with southern voters.
It feels like all of the money goes to the north, whereas we're putting in all of the money here in the south.
Do we trust Boris?
In this seat, at least, they're no longer sure. Libby Vina, News at 10, Chesham.
Rising cases of the Delta variant have provided cause for alarm in recent weeks, not least forcing a delay to what would have been the end of England's COVID restrictions on Monday. Cases of it have risen almost 80% in a week, but there is growing evidence the vaccines are working. Only around 10% of those in hospital have been double jabbed, with new data suggesting just one dose cuts the risk of hospitalisation by 75%. And from today, all over 18s in England could book that first jab.
A mass vaccination centre and not a wrinkle in sight. From now, jabs are being offered to adults as young as 18.
Yeah, I'm feeling fine, happy that I'm trying to get back to normal. Yeah, finally.
Really glad to get my first one and be on the way to being protected.
It just means if I go out, I know I'm at least partially covered from getting it.
If you haven't had a jab and you haven't got plans this weekend, the NHS will be happy to see you.
For the millions of people in their 20s and 30s who haven't yet taken up that offer, make this weekend the moment when you come forward and get that protection for you, for your friends, that keeps us all safe and hopefully gives us our summer back.
Delta variant cases continue to rise, with rates still highest here in the northwest. Numbers in hospitals have gone up, but fewer are dying from COVID than before.
There are very slight increases in the numbers of deaths, but this is what you'd expect with a highly transmissible, more pathogenic virus and the variant of the virus. But it gives us great comfort that it actually has been weakened, the link between the cases and the deaths. And that should be reassuring to all of us, as well as it's a signal and a message that this is the time to get 2 doses of the vaccine.
Public Health England says cases of the Delta variant have risen by 33,000 in a week to almost 76,000. A total of 806 people have been admitted to hospital with it, but only 84 have received both doses of the vaccine, just over 10%, showing full vaccination works as expected, around 90% of the time. And the question as to whether the Delta variant will lead to a huge surge in cases remains open. Daily case numbers are up, but the Office for National Statistics survey suggests the rate of growth may have slowed.
Take that with an element of caution, because of course the Delta variant is growing at slightly different rates in different parts of the country. It always takes a while for it to become established. So we really need to see kind of this behaviour repeated over maybe a week or two before we have more confidence as to what we might expect to see.
Today's survey reveals cases are by far the lowest in Wales. The First Minister today followed England and Scotland in delaying reopening plans.
Our scientific advisors believe that the United Kingdom is now at the pre-peak stage of a third wave of this pandemic. Wales may be 2 to 3 weeks behind what is happening in England and in Scotland, where tens of thousands of cases have now been confirmed.
Each jab will have an impact on the size of that third wave and how many people it will carry into hospital. But by how much, we'll just have to wait a few more weeks to find out. Tom Clark, News at 10.
Charges, even fewer of that number. Of rapes reported in this country and those ending in a conviction has long been a source of national shame. Despite more and more victims having the courage to come forward, prosecutions have headed in the opposite direction and are at their lowest in England and Wales since records began. Just 3% of investigations result in charges, even fewer of that number in a conviction. Now, a long-awaited review has suggested ways to better support victims, including returning phones within 24 hours, pre-recording court interviews and stronger scrutiny of suspects. But campaigners say they need to see progress.
In this part of the southwest, rape conviction rates are among the lowest in the country. And that's desperately troubling when the national picture shows that since 2015, the number of reported rapes has gone up, but the number of convictions, always woefully low, is now so minimal that last year fewer than 3% of alleged rapes ended in a conviction.
We need to look at the suspect in much more detail than we...
It's led to detectives here opening up all their investigations to a team of academics which found they were missing vital evidence of repeat offenders. They're now piloting a scheme which looks more closely at past patterns of behaviour, but not for the first time.
How frustrating is it that essentially you tried this, austerity came along and you had to stop it and now you're starting again?
I think it's incredibly frustrating because, again, it feels on a personal level that we've taken a step back. But we need to look forward. 60% of those people that are named as suspects in our crimes are suspected of other serious offences, 25% of other sex offences. That means that we need to look wider because people repeat this behaviour.
Like the man who repeatedly raped Naomi. It took her 5 years to persuade the justice system she had a case.
I went to the authorities about sexual abuse, rape. I wasn't believed. I had to fight for it to go to trial, and in the end we got a conviction of 30 years.
So he got 30 years, and yet originally you were told there wasn't a case. What did it mean to you not to be believed?
It's devastating. And when it's the justice system that turn around and pretty much say that they're not believing you, it's the worst thing possible that can happen.
And even when charges are swiftly brought, some victims are having to wait 3 years for a court date. Of almost 36,000 rape cases reported 5 years ago, a staggering 1,800 victims are still waiting for justice. The government's repentant, but won't accept that cutting costs is to blame, although both the courts and the police have suffered.
Much of what you're asking the police to do now, putting offenders at the centre of their investigations, was piloted back in 2016. You cancelled it because of austerity. How do you defend that?
There are a number of reasons why prosecutions have fallen. There's no silver bullet to this, but the fact that we might correct it in the future does nothing to negate the fact that too many people haven't had justice over the last few years, and we're very sorry about that.
Back in Bristol, they're determined to shift from judging how credible a victim might be to focusing harder on the accused's behaviour. The government may have apologised, but unless it can deliver that change nationwide, there's little chance of justice being done. Rachel Youngin, News at 10.
People in Greece have been left shocked after a man confessed to murdering his British wife, having initially claimed she was killed during a violent robbery. 20-year-old Caroline Crouch was found dead next to her baby daughter at the couple's home on the outskirts of Athens last month. 33-year-old Babis Anagnostopoulos was at a memorial service for his wife yesterday when officers arrived to question him and later said that he had confessed. Now, given its significant influence across the Middle East, the result of today's presidential election in Iran will be watched closely. The hardline cleric Ibrahim Raisi is all but certain to replace the more moderate President Rouhani. And as tensions remain high with both the US and Israel, any shift in tone from the Iranian leadership could have far-reaching implications.
Across the Islamic Republic, people had been told it was their duty to vote in these presidential elections. They answered the call in this Tehran neighbourhood, but analysts predict turnout could be an issue. How many have voted today could be as significant as the actual result. But the first ballot to be cast was that of the supreme leader. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said the election would win great points in the international arena. Hardliner Ibrahim Raisi is the man widely predicted to be the next president and unlikely to ease tense relations with the West. But at home, this woman refused to vote in today's presidential election.
I don't think it's a fair election. It's definitely not fair and free election. I can't find anyone who can represent my idea.
Even younger voters who turned out today said their generation felt alienated.
All my friends, they are not going to vote because he very hopeless to future in Iran.
While COVID is hampering voter turnout, are there more fundamental reasons?
In some ways, what's at stake here is more than just electing a new president. In the past, the authorities have used the turnout figures to claim that the system that governs this country is legitimate.
Results are expected to be announced tomorrow. For Iranians and the wider region, the consequences of this presidential election matter. Neil Connery, News at 10, Tehran.
Now to a warning that's been issued to cat owners back here. An outbreak of a rare and potentially fatal feline disease may be linked to pet food stocked by retailers like Sainsbury's and Pets at Home. They've pulled it from their shelves and an urgent recall has been issued for the products made by the manufacturer Fold Hill. There's no known risk to humans, but more than 200 cases in cats have been detected so far.
Brady had been part of Kristen Negrotti's life for 8 years, so she was devastated when she had to decide to put him to sleep. He'd been diagnosed with the same disease her 2-year-old cat Elle had died from a few days earlier.
They thought they might find something that could help, but then we found out that thus far no cats had survived at all. We decided to go in and see him while he was still himself. And we got to spend an hour with him, and he was very happy and still just like my perfect cat.
Both cats had developed feline pancytopenia, a rare condition where blood cell levels are dangerously low. The Royal Veterinary College now knows of more than 200 cases, with nearly 3/4 proving fatal.
They're presenting usually with really vague signs, which is difficult for owners and vets maybe to recognise what's going on. But when they start to show more severe symptoms, often it's bleeding.
One possible link is cat food, so as a precaution a number of products have been recalled. They include 2 by Sainsbury's from their hypoallergenic range, 7 flavours sold under the Applause brand with this code on the bag ending 009, and 12 types sold under the AVA brand by Pets at Home. All the details are on our website at itv.com/news.
We're not able to confirm that there's definitely a link, but there is certainly sufficient association between the deaths and the use of this cat food to warrant a voluntary recall.
Vicky Winchester's kitten Delilah nearly died 2 weeks ago, and she's urging owners to stay vigilant.
If you have any slight change of character in your cat that has been fed any of these brands that have been recalled from this factory, take them to your vet. A routine blood test early enough could save their lives.
The recalled cat food's being tested, and it's hoped the source of this devastating outbreak can be found soon. Martha Fairley, News at 10.
The very welcome news tonight is that the footballer Christian Eriksen has been discharged from hospital. The 29-year-old has been fitted with a heart-starting device after suffering cardiac arrest during Denmark's match against Finland on Saturday. Today, he visited his teammates before returning home. Eriksen thanked fans for their very many And finally tonight, one of the great joys of travelling by rail, of course, is sitting back and enjoying the view. And what better to look out on than the wilds of Dartmoor? Well, for the first time in decades, that's something that will be possible again when the line between Exeter and Oakhampton reopens. The latter was a popular destination on the rail network through the 50s and early 60s. But following cuts in the years after the Beeching report, the station closed in 1972. And for years, it lay empty, falling into disrepair. But it's since been restored to its former glory and will soon be waiting for visitors to roll into town once more.
Cutting its way through the scenic Devon countryside, a first look at what will be known as the Dartmoor line. On board an engineering train, we covered all 14 miles of this freshly laid track. 49 years since it was last a fully operational line, the route between Exeter and Oakhampton is nearing completion. 24,000 railway sleepers may have been put down in just a few weeks, but the work is not over yet. Ultimately, this line, it's hoped, will cut road traffic as well as the time it takes by car between the two ends of the line.
I think there's fantastic opportunities here, to connect Oakhampton with the rest of the world, really. It's going to bring people from the local area into Exeter, job opportunities, all that kind of thing, but also make sure the rest of the country can visit Oakhampton, visit Dartmoor, visit the Dartmoor National Park.
A government efficiency drive led to swathes of Britain's railways being axed in the 60s. Dr. Beeching's cuts closed part, but not all of the Dartmoor line. But a few years later, it succumbed, with the last regular service in 1972. Its renewal is seen as the start of a regeneration of lost lines. Reopening these railways has been a dream for many for decades, and now it's happening. The hope is it will bring both environmental and economic benefit to those living here on the edge of Dartmoor. Tourism and the much-needed money it brings will be welcomed. When visitors step off the regular train at Oakhampton Station, it'll feel like stepping back in time.
That's the whole essence of it, really, is to try and make people feel they're walking into the past, but obviously coming on a modern train from Exeter. That will be the ambition in the future.
It just is a lovely space, and people come here even when the trains haven't been coming. They just love to come to this particular place.
For now, passenger trains can only pass the Dartmoor line, but not for much longer. It's set to reopen by the end of the year, 150 years after it first opened. Rupert Evelyn, News at 10, Devon.
Just the soothing pictures we all needed after tonight. That is it from us. Thanks for staying up. Have a great weekend. Good night.